It's Mr. Pedigo, Harry Pedigo, HP, whatever you want to call me. Doing a little video today. We've been discussing Greek culture and Greek literature in class in my 5th and 6th and also my 7th and 8th grade social studies classes. And we've been looking at the works of Homer, or at least works that historians attribute to Homer, in particular the Iliad and the Odyssey. These books, these stories they're important in that they give us a pretty insightful look into what the Greeks, the ancient Greeks, especially ancient Grecian men, valued in their culture and society, right? The books are sort of, they can be appreciated, especially the Iliad, can be really appreciated as a work which reflects the values and the characteristics that a Greek man, a Greek warrior should have, right? One of the questions that my students brought up, they said, hey, Pedigo, why do we look at this guy Achilles? Why do we look at Achilles and we say, hey, he's like the main character of the Iliad? Why do we look at him and say this is how a Greek man should be? This is how men should be. This is a commentary on what makes a man of virtue and a man of admiration. Because he's kind of a jerk, he goes, they're in this 10-year siege of Troy, and Achilles gets all ticked off because somebody steals his girlfriend, and he just pouts for like 75% of the novel. Not a novel, sorry, the story. So how is that, really a good example of a man, of an admirable human? Well, I'm making this video to talk today about kind of the psychology behind the figure of Achilles and what maybe Homer or what the Greeks were trying to tell us and other people, First of all, when we look at these stories, we need to appreciate that not all characters that we look at are altogether good. In fact, a complex character like Achilles is, or a troubling character, because you're like, look at, he's the best warrior ever, right? So he's great at something. Also not super great, as far as his ego goes. And I think of the story of Achilles, especially this part where he pouts for an extended period of time over his girlfriend being gone and refuses to fight, and
ultimately results in the death of one of his best friends. It's insightful. I think the takeaway from this is that hero figures, people we learn from, people who are symbolic in works of literature or works of history, they're not always full-out good people. In fact, it's almost more meaningful that Achilles is not a fully, great person, because we get to see his journey, his struggle, his realization. We get to see him sort of confront his ego and eventually go and help win the Trojan War, right? These characters like Achilles are very important because it teaches us that, one, you can be a good person and still have flaws, and that to be a great person, you need to be aware, you need to be woken up from these things. And unfortunately, not a whole lot of us will have these major wake-up things like Achilles has. We might have them later on in life. We don't always have our best friend killed in combat because of our hubris, because of our our arrogance, or our ego. But the story of Achilles shows that. And one of the things we talked about in social studies today was, this is like, kind of psychological, but in order to progress, in order to become better, in order to become the absolute best that you can be, we first have to acknowledge, our flaws. That's like step number one in building yourself. You need to be able to acknowledge acknowledge your flaws. You need to be able to acknowledge, hey, I'm not perfect. I might be the greatest warrior ever to have lived, but I'm kind of a crappy friend. I'm kind of a crappy soldier in some aspects because I'm not able to follow orders. I'm not able to put my ego aside. And ultimately what we see happens when they're not able to do that, what Achilles sees is, bad things happen. Things that are destructive to you, things that are hurtful to you. And so we can take from this very minuscule detail of the story of Achilles that, hey, we've got to be in search of self-understanding, waking up from the lie that we are perfect so that we can pursue perfection by fixing these things, growing stronger, right? And I think that this can be applied, and it's cool for me, it's always inspiring to apply a really grand mythological or historical story to a very minuscule or small, specific, finite part of your life. For Achilles, it was, hubris and arrogance that he had to realize, I'm not going to be the savior. I'm not going to be the soldier. I'm not going to be the warrior, the person that I need to be unless I am woken up from this idea that I am, the only thing in my world and that it's all about me and that I'm the best, I'm the greatest. We have to have humility. The story of Achilles teaches us that we need to be humble and we need to be very, very focused on rigorous self-examination so that we can avoid the death of friends or whatever the misfortune or tragedy is that might befall us or our family or our close ones or the world or society because of our hubris. And this starts on a small level, saying, hey, I'm not good at writing persuasive essays. How can I take steps to get better at that and improve? The number one step you take is acknowledging it. And that's what the story of Achilles, and that's why we study Greek myths in general, Greek stories in general. They teach us things. It's important to remember that.